Captain America Brave New World is a really poorly named movie because nothing about it is brave or new. I don't think it's particularly controversial to point out that Cap 4 isn't very good. Most people, at least that I know who have seen it, left the theater feeling disappointed that our beloved Marvel Cinematic Universe would continue to stoop so low, would do the mantle of Captain America and the character of Sam Wilson so dirty. But what exactly is it about Captain America Brave New World that renders such negative responses from audiences? I mean, the MCU has put out bad movies before. Whether your idea of a bad movie is measured by poor fan reception, critical analysis, or box office run, Captain America Brave New World isn't unique for being a bad Marvel movie. It's just unique in that it's the one that I personally rated the lowest on Letterboxd, and I include the likes of The Incredible Hulk and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania when I say that. As far as I'm concerned, Captain America Brave New World is not only bad, but it's so insidiously bad that we need to take some time to dissect and discuss why. So that's what this is, a conversation in which we explore what makes Captain America Brave New World just so insufferable, as well as break down the real-world, pop-cultural, and socio-political context that got us here. Before I really get into things, though, here's a quick summary of Captain America Brave New World for those lucky enough to have avoided watching it. Infamous MCU politician Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, now played by Harrison Ford following the tragic passing of William Hurt, is elected President of the United States on his radical platform, Together, period. I'm obsessed with his campaign signs, by the way, that just look like the Ross Dress for Less logo. Anyway, Thunderbolt Ross sends Sam Wilson, aka Captain America, and Joaquin Torres, aka the Falcon, on a mission to Mexico to recover classified stolen items, and then thanks them for their help on this mission by inviting them to an event at the White House. In an effort to mend ties between the US government and the populations they've previously harmed, Wilson tells Ross that he'll only attend this event if an invitation is also extended to his friend Isaiah Bradley, a military veteran who the government experimented on, imprisoned, and turned into a super soldier. Bradley rightfully doesn't trust the US government, but does believe in Sam, so hesitantly they attend the event together. At the event, Isaiah Bradley learns to use AirDrop on his phone, in a minutes-long scene clearly sponsored by Apple. They talked about AirDrop for so long that I thought it was actually important to the plot of the movie. It was not. Ross then asks Wilson to help him reform the Avengers, a task that Wilson doesn't feel immediately comfortable undertaking. Ross also announces that a new metal was discovered on the celestial island formed during Eternals. That metal, adamantium, is stronger and more versatile than vibranium, is a hint toward the MCU's future X-Men, and is what Cap and Falcon recovered on their mission to Mexico earlier in the movie. But during Ross's presentation, all hell breaks loose. A bunch of men, including Bradley, start to shoot at him. They're apprehended by Ross's head of security, Ruth Bat-Seraph, and soon regain their senses with no memory of what just happened. Isaiah Bradley is arrested, proving him right for being skeptical of the US government, and causing him to lose faith in Sam. Then a bunch of other stuff goes down, more missions, more fights, more geopolitical conflicts, and eventually Wilson and Torres find out that this guy, Dr. Samuel Stearns, who you might, but let's face it, probably don't remember from The Incredible Hulk, has been using the song Mr. Blue as a trigger in mind control experiments on US soldiers. I did not understand until reading the Wikipedia summary of this movie that the song Mr. Blue even played at the White House event. I thought that the soldiers were being mind controlled through corrupted files airdropped to their phones. Then more stuff happens. I'm definitely skipping details that aren't relevant to my upcoming analysis, and Thunderbolt Ross tells Sam Wilson that he's dying of heart failure. Samuel Stearns has been developing pills to help prolong Ross's life, and Ross has been holding him captive for fear that he wouldn't keep making the pills if freed. Then Congressman James Buchanan Bucky Barnes shows up for the only good scene in the movie, good being a very generous descriptor, and instills the confidence in Sam to proudly hold the title of Captain America. Then more stuff happens, and you're supposed to say, oh no, Stearns poisoned Ross's pills. But you don't say that, because you already know that, because you've seen posters and trailers and merch for this movie which make very clear that Ross eventually turns into the Red Hulk, a reveal which has not yet happened despite us now being in the final 15 minutes of the film. So yeah, shock surprise, he hulks out. I suppose this is meant to be a karmic gotcha, like, yeah, serves you right for chasing after Bruce Banner all those years ago, but the audience is never really reminded that Ross did that, so it's kind of just a thing that happens. There's also a whole thread in Cap 4 where Ross seeks forgiveness from his daughter Betty, but the movie doesn't quite explain why Betty resents him, and it also doesn't explain how he's grown better as a person to earn her forgiveness. So again, that's just kind of a thing that happens. And then the movie ends. Oh, and Ross goes to jail. They send him to the raft, that floating prison he made during Captain America Civil War, and Isaiah Bradley is freed, and there's a post-credit scene where Stearns warns Cap of alien attacks or something, and then the movie ends. Cinema. Captain America Brave New World is the 35th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a franchise which has rather outgrown the concept on which it was founded that each installment would be a standalone story that quietly connects with other standalone stories until their culmination in a crossover epic. In a 2010 interview, Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige described the ambitious infancy of the MCU. It's never been done before. The other filmmakers aren't used to getting actors from other movies that other filmmakers have cast, certain plot lines that are connected, or certain locations that are connected. But I think everyone was on board for it and thinks that it's fun. Primarily because we've always remained consistent saying that the movie that we are making comes first. All of the connective tissue, all of that stuff is fun, is going to be very important if you want it to be, but the reason that all the filmmakers are on board is that their movies need to stand on their own. It started with the Avengers, a few characters from a few movies who came together to form a team and save the city, and it peaked with Infinity War and Endgame, a two-part cinematic extravaganza featuring dozens of characters from 20-something movies who came together to save the universe. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you'd think that a movie in which they save the universe, called Endgame, would be the clear end point. That should be it, the story is over. Well, no. Endgame was the highest-grossing movie of all time upon its release, and the MCU is still the highest-grossing movie franchise of all time. Even an MCU flop like Cap 4 makes hundreds of millions of dollars in the box office, not to mention what it makes on stuff like merch sales and Disneyland tickets. As long as these movies continue to bring in more money than most movies could ever dream of, Disney is not going to stop making them. So the question then becomes, how do you continue to grow even bigger than the biggest movie of all time? How do you continue to surprise and impress audiences with the same formula you've been using for over a decade? You don't. On January 15th, 2021, Disney Plus premiered its first MCU television series, WandaVision. Don't get it twisted, I'm not about to tell you that WandaVision was the beginning of the end of the MCU. Or am I? Unlike Captain America Brave New World, WandaVision is one of my favorite MCU projects, nay, pieces of media ever made. What WandaVision did mark for the MCU was a change in strategy. Instead of trying to one-up themselves, grow bigger than they ever had, the MCU went smaller, no longer just making movies for the big screen, but also television shows for the small one. And it worked. WandaVision was a massive success, with millions of viewers tuning in week by week throughout its initial release. It also wasn't the first time that Marvel took a gamble on the type of content they were putting out. When Guardians of the Galaxy came out in 2014, it shocked everyone. Upon release, Chris Pratt was not yet a movie star, Zoe Saldana was best known for being Blue, and no MCU movie had yet centered non-Avengers characters. In an interview with the New York Post, Kevin Feige explained, "Guardians was so different from anything we'd done before. It's the 10th movie we've done. We figured that if we continued to succeed, by the 10th movie it was time to take a left turn. By taking that left turn, Guardians of the Galaxy became the highest-grossing MCU movie about characters who weren't first introduced in another MCU movie. Over a decade later, it still holds that record. So, after Endgame, Marvel employed the same strategy. They took a left turn, not only featuring different characters, but also incorporating different storytelling styles into their franchise. But if that's the case, then why, come 2025, does Captain America Brave New World feel so exhaustingly derivative of pre-Endgame Marvel movies? Weren't we changing the formula? Put a pin in that question. We'll come back to it later. Imagine going to the movies, watching an entire film, and after it ends, there are no credits. No names of actors, producers, directors, writers, nothing. No one, it just ends. Maybe it says made by Marvel Studios or made by Disney, but that's it. No credits. Today, this is a bizarre concept, but in the early days of the video game industry, this was the standard. Video games were made by companies, not individuals, or so those companies wanted you to think, and until the mid-1980s, game designers would go wildly underpaid and completely uncredited for their work. In jaded protest of this unfair standard, then Atari game designer Warren Robinett tucked a message into a secret chamber of his 1979 game, Adventure. The message read, "Created by Warren Robinett." Eventually, as more and more people played the game, more and more of them discovered this hidden message. One player even wrote a letter to Atari to express just how much he enjoyed finding it. But Atari executives were less than pleased. In an emergency meeting called to address the matter, Atari's then director of software development Steve Wright pleaded that everyone just calm down. Didn't you even read the letter? The kid loved it. Wright then compared uncovering Robinette's message to finding an Easter egg, and thus, after immediately making it official policy that all Atari games must contain them going forward, the pop cultural Easter egg was born. In 2008, Nick Fury approached Tony Stark in the post-credit scene of Iron Man.
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
By today's standards, it's easy to forget that back then, this was an Easter egg. Before the popularization of Marvel movies and their tradition of including these scenes gave audiences a reason to expect post-credits content, few people ever actually watched film credits. I really enjoy how, unintentionally, the MCU's first Easter egg encouraged audiences to engage with the names of the people who made the media they consumed, in the same way that Warren Robinette's inaugural Adventure Easter egg did. Of course, that's not a requirement of being an Easter egg. An Easter egg in media is any hidden detail for fans to uncover, but with Atari requiring Easter eggs of their creators and the MCU eventually doing the same, that's just really poetic, I guess. Anyways, the Iron Man Easter egg feels obvious now. According to this Wikipedia page that I frankly don't feel like fact-checking, the MCU has now featured 83 mid- and post-credit scenes across 47 properties. That's like someone saying, "Happy Easter," and then handing you a basket of eggs. Like, great, in today's economy, a basket of eggs is worth its weight in gold, so thank you, I'm rich now, but also the fun of an Easter egg isn't hunting for it. I wanted to hunt for it. So to appease fans who wanted to keep hunting for Easter eggs, Marvel had to get more creative, add extra steps to their treasure hunts. Easter eggs became a tool for tying together their cinematic universe, sometimes going as far as to spin off into entire TV shows. But once the Easter eggs are important to the greater story, don't they cease to be Easter eggs at all? Like, they're just part of the movie now. They're also less immediately rewarding. In the 1970s, a Stanford University psychologist conducted what's known as the Marshmallow experiment. In the experiment, a child is offered a single marshmallow and told that they can eat the marshmallow right away, or if they wait 15 minutes, they could have a second marshmallow and eat both. This experiment tests the child's delayed gratification, their ability to resist an immediate reward in favor of getting a better reward later. Sometimes Easter eggs are the first marshmallow, something you find and enjoy right away. The MCU decided, though, that some Easter eggs should cash in on delayed gratification. Nick Fury shows up in Iron Man, and the audience doesn't enjoy the full reward of his appearance until the Avengers.
There was an idea. Stark knows this. Called the Avengers Initiative.
And that process of plant and payoff really worked. New Marvel fans were going back to catch up on dozens of MCU projects before Endgame so they'd understand the true value of the story being told. They put in the work because Marvel taught delayed gratification. Later MCU projects, though, have failed to cash in on their Easter egg promises. In choosing to go smaller than their previous blockbusters, the MCU has become disjointed, and many Easter egg trails lead to dead ends. Therefore, Marvel has somewhat revoked their promise of a better reward down the line if we just wait. So while almost all Marvel projects contain details that hint toward future ones, Captain America: Brave New World feels especially bogged down by these details because the audiences who watch every Marvel project, trusting Marvel despite their false promises, are tired of waiting for good entertainment. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that I think Marvel's new version of an Easter egg, something to hunt for not because it stands alone as an entertaining detail, but because it hints toward what's to come in the story, has negatively impacted the general public's ability to care about media at large. It's commonly pointed out in conversations about media analysis that no art exists in a vacuum. This is to say that all stories, whether part of a greater cinematic universe or not, are connected by way of the real world in which we create and consume them. This is why, in elementary school reading classes, students learn about making connections. Text-to-self connections for when something in the reading reminds you of something in your own life, text-to-text connections for likening two different texts to each other, and text-to-world connections for relating media to a historical or cultural event. Many people who watch Captain America: Brave New World make a text-to-world connection between President Ross getting shot at and President Trump getting shot at. These two events reminding audiences of each other encourages these audiences to then draw further connections between Ross and Trump. This is one of the reasons that art can be so powerful in helping us understand and process the world. Even though that scene in Captain America: Brave New World was written and produced before the 2024 presidential election, it gave us a new framework through which to think about that election and our president. But a major problem with the MCU is that its executives don't want us to make text-to-world connections. universe. Instead of tell stories that artistically interpret or comment on our reality, Marvel is solely concerned with its own fictional universe. The Easter eggs they place in every project are a way of encouraging us to connect one of their movies to another one of their movies, rather than to other movies or to our own world. Because of this, Captain America Brave New World is exhaustingly overwhelmed with Easter eggs and references to past and future MCU projects. It serves as a sequel to the Captain America trilogy, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, The Incredible Hulk, Eternals, and more. It also sets up storylines that we may or may not revisit later. Additionally, Cap 4 was subjected to numerous rewrites and reshoots in an attempt to avoid all sorts of backlash and therefore seclude it from the real world. While the very first pop culture Easter egg to be called an Easter egg was a protest of Atari game designers' real-life working conditions, MCU Easter eggs have devolved into a tool to prevent you from thinking critically about real life. Published in December 1940, the very first Captain America comic book featured its titular character punching Adolf Hitler on its front cover. Today, this is fairly innocuous. Captain America should punch Hitler in the face. Anyone who's ever taken a history class knows why. But the United States would not join the fight against Hitler in World War II until December 1941, a full year after this comic came out. Public opinion on the war was therefore divided at the time of publication, and while America eventually joining the Allied forces would spark an era of patriotic unity on the home front, the Jewish creators of Marvel comic books would still face backlash from Nazis in New York City. This backlash didn't stop them, though, from writing politically charged stories, even when it reached points of violence and death threats. They understood that what made their comics meaningful were the statements they made with them, and if someone had a problem with them taking a stance against Adolf Hitler, well, who cares? Due to the inescapable American patriotism of World War II, Captain America was an incredibly popular character. By 2025, though, patriotism has plummeted, and Americans have more varied ideas of what it means to take pride in their country. This uncertainty about what it means to be an American is exemplified by Marvel Studios' inability to let Sam Wilson take the wheel of his own story. Of course, he's only ever been the title character in 2 Marvel projects, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Captain America Brave New World, but I fear that even in just 2 stories, he hasn't been afforded the same character growth as his predecessor Steve Rogers was in any 2 of his stories. While Steve's stories generally watched him grapple with his identity in relation to an ever-changing world,
I went under. The world was at war. I wake up, they say we won.
The world has changed.
Internet, so helpful. Been reading that a lot, trying to catch up.
Sam's stories only watch him grapple with his identity in relation to a now unchanging Steve Rogers.
Steve believed in you. He trusted you.
It feels like it belongs to someone else.
You're not Steve Rogers.
You're right. I'm not.
And perhaps this makes sense. Perhaps Sam Wilson is being written that way intentionally to reflect America's own identity crisis, its citizens' struggle for change and progress in the shadow of tradition and conservatism. But as much as I want to believe this commentary is intentional, I don't, because Sam Wilson in the MCU does not himself ever get to grow. The same is true of Thunderbolt Ross, whose entire arc centers on wanting to prove to his daughter that he's become a better person without ever actually providing evidence of that change. Instead of improving, Ross gets sent to the same prison he created in Captain America Civil War, a prison that is repeatedly misused against superheroes. Instead of apologizing for creating and serving immorally as warden for this prison, Ross just faces the consequences of his own actions. But progress is not made. This movie just claims that the raft is necessary, that Ross creating it as a villain in Civil War was somehow a good thing. Like, yeah, justice is served. You were right the whole time, Ross. Additionally, Sam Wilson blindly takes Ross's word for his growth, trusts without evidence that he's bettered himself, and Captain America Brave New World expects its audience to do the same. This movie preaches that people are capable of changing for the better, but that despite their capacity for change, forgiveness need not be earned by actually doing so. Instead, to be a good person is not to grow or to better oneself, but rather to offer blindly optimistic and unearned forgiveness regardless of who it endangers. And that is how this movie represents the current state of American politics. Captain America Brave New World, like real-life US politicians, preaches hope and optimism, while itself remaining pathetically distrustful and fearful of its own audience. I mentioned before that Marvel Comics creators in the 1940s faced violence and death threats because they were a largely Jewish group of people creating often outspokenly political work work during the Holocaust. Today, Marvel fails to live up to their founders' standards, shying away from political commentary rather than taking pride in it. While superhero media once intentionally expounded on the real world, superheroes, like Easter eggs, have devolved into a tool to suppress critical thinking. This issue of Marvel not valuing or understanding the implications of their work is clearer now with Brave New World than ever before. The MCU's fear of criticism is proven through their repeated rewrites and reshoots on this project in response to backlash from fans online. I'm not going to sit here and list every single character and plot point that was originally included in Cap 4 and then later written out. Any number of Reddit threads can give you that information, but I do want to talk about the bizarre inclusion of the character Ruth Bat-Seraph. In Marvel Comics, Ruth is known as Sabra and is typically described as a sort of Israeli equivalent to Captain America. She was introduced in the 80s in what were, again, very outspokenly political comics, though has not been a particularly prolific character since then. Her first major comic appearance was in The Incredible Hulk issue 256, in which Bruce Banner unknowingly ends up in Israel as the Hulk and rampages through Tel Aviv while the Israeli military tries and fails to apprehend him. Confused, tired, and hungry, Banner reverts back to his human form and bonds with a young Arab boy over their shared plight. Bruce helps the boy, Sahad, steal a watermelon to eat, and Sahad shares that sometimes it is very hard to be an Arab in Israel. Both my people and the Israelis say that this land is theirs. They could share it, but two very old books tell them they must kill each other over it. Then Banner considers, Sahad and I have some things in common. No families, no security. But that's where it stops. No one's hunting him. No one hates him. No one's trying to hurt him. The lucky kid doesn't have a care in the boom! I feel like the Costco guys. There's no way to read this without sounding like the Costco guys. The lucky kid doesn't have a care in the boom! Sahad! The explosion has reduced the Israeli cafe to rubble. When Banner hulks out again, Sabra shows up, tries to stop him, and says, I charge you with complicity in their barbarous act of terrorism, and with the murder of that boy. Then Banner, through tears, explains that he did not murder Sahad, that Sahad died at the hands of two groups of people unwilling to share their land. Then the last two panels of the comic read, It has taken the Hulk to make her see this dead Arab boy as a human being. It has taken a monster to awaken her of her own sense of humanity. Yikes. I don't even know where to start with this. I personally didn't know that this character existed until 2022, when it was announced that Ruth Bat-Seraph would play a major role in Captain America: Brave New World. So by the time that I had heard of her, I already knew vaguely that she was controversial. In writing this video essay, I finally read the comic that I just shared with you, and it astounds me that while Marvel Studios seeks to appeal to a wide audience, they've now elected to include a deeply politically charged character in their film. And I know what you're thinking, Bunky, didn't you just criticize them for being apolitical? Isn't it a good thing that they're including Ruth Bat-Seraph and finally ruffling feathers, making a statement? No, because I will never applaud a brand for only standing on business to platform racism and ethnic cleansing, because that's what this is. I recognize that Hulk 256 makes the case for a two-state solution, says that violence in the Middle East would cease if everyone could just calm down and get along, but A, that's not how violence works, and B, folks who promote a two-state solution rarely ever actually support Israel and Palestine equally. This comic writes in text bubbles that it favors peace, but it also introduces an Israeli superhero to the world who did not view a Palestinian child as human until he died. Theoretically, Ruth learned. She recognizes his humanity now, but just like with Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America: Brave New World, readers have to take the book's word for it without ever actually being shown evidence of growth or change. We didn't see character growth, but we did see Sahad die, and we did see Marvel include Ruth in their new movie, but not include any Arab characters. So we know how Marvel executives feel on the matter of Israel and Palestine, but casual viewers do not. And Marvel executives know that many fans are upset by Ruth's inclusion in the movie, so to prevent the casual fans from finding out about Marvel's politics, Brave New World was put through rewrites and reshoots. Instead of being an Israeli intelligence agent, Ruth is now inexplicably a former Black Widow, like Natasha and Yelena. She's from Israel, but doesn't don a comic-accurate Israel-themed suit. She's just Ross's head of security, a role that could have been filled by anyone. But despite backlash, that role still went to Ruth. She wasn't written out of Brave New World entirely because in addition to pro-Palestine fans protesting her inclusion in the movie, pro-Israel fans protested her removal from it. And when you're so scared of backlash from all directions that you run from it, you inevitably run in circles. You tell a story in which nothing happens. You make Captain America: Brave New World. A few minutes ago, I posed a question. Why does Captain America: Brave New World feel so exhaustingly derivative of pre-Endgame Marvel movies despite so many attempts to change course and try something different? Perhaps you figured it out by now. As evidenced by their use of Easter eggs that distract from critical thinking and their repeated political cowardice, it's clear that Marvel Studios is afraid of their fans. At the end of the 2010s, tides were rapidly changing with respect to diversity in Hollywood. The percentage of top films directed by people of color more than doubled between 2015 and 2018, the percentage of popular films with female leads more than tripled between 2014 and 2019, and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the folks in charge of the Oscars, instituted new representation and inclusion standards designed to encourage equitable representation on and off screen. The diversification of Marvel Studios' content and their choice to feature more women and people of color post-Endgame was just as much a response to fans demanding they keep up with these industry-wide standards as it was to the culmination of their own Infinity Saga, either way motivated by financial gain and not actual concern for uplifting marginalized voices. But as quickly as the tide turned in favor of diversity, it's been slowly turning back, with both the percentage of female leads and directors of color in popular films decreasing over the first half of the 2020s. 2021 was the year of Marvel's post-Endgame return, and it was also their most diverse year to date, with about 50% of their projects being led and or directed by women and or people of color. But despite Captain America: Brave New World being a product of a more diverse time, both led and directed by black men, it feels lazily derivative of earlier Marvel movies because, due to negative feedback from fans online, Marvel Studios' corporate overlords took control of the project. Marvel is so scared of upsetting fans that while, sure, they're finally letting people of color make movies, they're not actually allowing people of color the same creative freedom as their white counterparts. And while I don't have hard evidence to prove this, I didn't work on these movies, nor have I spoken to the folks that did, I have noticed a pattern of disappointment in Anthony Mackie's interviews about it. Additionally, rumors circulated last year about director Julius Onah getting removed as director before reshoots. Both Mackie and Onah have continued to promote this movie over the past few months, and therefore it's possible that I'm just believing too much internet hearsay, but I also can't help but think about director Nia DaCosta continuing to promote the Marvels despite Disney CEO Bob Iger blaming her directly for its lackluster performance. In November 2023, Bob Iger said, "The Marvels was shot during COVID. There wasn't as much supervision on the set, so to speak, where we have executives really looking over what's being done day after day after day." So DaCosta, in his eyes, failed as leader, and any movies shot after the Marvels would probably have more supervision from executives on set to prevent that failure from repeating itself. And too much input from executives is exactly what led Captain America: Brave New World to feeling like a cheap knockoff of previous Marvel movies. It wasn't a problem with the director or the actors or the writers or anyone except the executives who permitted the diversification of creatives on their projects when it was in vogue to do so, and immediately backtracked when the projects being made no longer suited their vision for the MCU. Captain America: Brave New World imitates a Phase 1 Marvel movie because the old dudes who have been in charge since then just won't let go of the wheel. So what now? Marvel can't grow bigger than Endgame, and intentionally trying to go smaller didn't pan out. They aren't going to start making any compelling artistic commentary anytime soon since they're afraid to polarize their fan base. They sought to return to their roots kind of with Captain America: Brave New World cheaply imitating some of their earliest movies, but that didn't work either. Marvel Studios is, first and foremost, a business. They need to make money, but critical reception is weak and online fan conversation is diminishing. People just don't trust the name Marvel like they used to. So what kind of strategy can they employ that keeps critics watching, keeps fans talking, and gets butts in seats despite the whole superhero movies are dead thing?
There's something wrong.
The Avengers are not coming. Who will keep people safe?
That teaser for Marvel's upcoming film Thunderbolts was posted under the title Absolute Cinema on March 7th, 2025, just a few days after the 97th Annual Academy Awards. This year, low-budget independent films dominated the Oscars. Flow was animated entirely in a free software called Blender and won Best Animated Picture. The Brutalist won an award for each hour of its runtime, garnering 3 wins for its 10 nominations. Anora, which cost just $6 million to make, brought home 5 awards including Best Picture. Additionally, the Oscars outperformed the Super Bowl in social media conversation this year. According to The Wrap, the Oscars logged 104.2 million social interactions, making it the #1 TV program of the year online. What Marvel took away from all of this data is that today, both Hollywood professionals and audiences would rather see smart, artistic, independent cinema than mind-numbing Marvel-branded blockbusters. And while Marvel could make 50 Anoras for the cost of one Captain America Brave New World, they're obviously not gonna do that, but they will style their marketing and who knows, maybe their movies going forward, more like the movies that clearly resonate with audiences today. Instead of saying, from the stars of Black Widow, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever, they'll say, from the stars of Midsommar, A Different Man, and You Hurt My Feelings. Instead of comparing Thunderbolts to other MCU movies, they'll compare it to Oscar winners like Minari and Everything Everywhere All at Once. They're gonna hide the Marvel logo. Captain America Brave New World, by the way, was the first Marvel movie ever to not include the now classic animated Marvel Studios intro, and they're gonna distance themselves from their own bad name. Honestly, this is all really funny to me, because at the end of the day, it's still Marvel running away from angry fans. Just in this case, the fan complaint is superhero movies suck, and so what they're running from is the exact thing they make. At least with Thunderbolts. It looks like Fantastic Four will lean into a more unadulteratedly campy comic book movie vibe, but whether that vibe will persist through the rest of Marvel's upcoming projects remains to be seen, and in my opinion isn't likely. Regardless of how those upcoming MCU projects do though, I'm glad that the future of cinema at large, according to the Oscars, seems to be moving in a pretty good direction. You've probably heard the phrase, life imitates art. This phrase was first written by Oscar Wilde in his 1889 essay, The Decay of Living, an Observation. He explains that art only works well when it disregards the reality in which it's made, that lying, the telling of beautiful, untrue things, is the proper aim of art. And he doesn't say this to promote disinformation, right? He's not advising you to get online and tweet misleading nonsense. Wilde says the modern novelist presents us with dull facts under the guise of fiction, basically critiquing modern writers for being so concerned with replicating reality that they fail to move us artistically. He says the moment art surrenders its imaginative medium, it surrenders everything. Why are we so concerned with art looking and feeling realistic when we could instead have art that inspires us to make reality more beautiful? The life imitates art part of this is that we are only capable of seeing in life what artists dare point out to us through art. The most profound failure of Captain America Brave New World is that it perfectly holds up a mirror to reality without pointing out anything we didn't already know about it. Watching it feels like watching the news. We know the government doesn't adequately support marginalized communities. We know politicians tout togetherness but don't work toward it. We know there's a monster in the White House. The first time I saw a Marvel movie, I was 11 years old. I vividly remember skipping out of the theater, not walking, skipping out of the theater, feeling like I could fly, feeling like I could do anything, be anyone. Captain America Brave New World does not elicit those feelings. I wish I could tell you it was so good that it motivated me to go out and make the world a better place, but no. Today, even our superhero movies are nihilistic. And that nihilism cut so deep that I realized the only way to combat the current socio-political crisis in our country is by making art ourselves, that does motivate people to make the world a better place, and to see beauty in reality they didn't witness before. So that's what I hope this video does for you. I hope that this conversation about Cap 4 and its stupid messaging that you should trust everyone equally, including, most insidiously, the people in charge, awakens you to just how much power you have to make the world a better place when you don't let that trust debilitate you, and when you instead point your optimism toward progress. Thank you so much for watching this very long video. I hope you enjoyed it, and that it made you think and feel more deeply than Captain America Brave New World could ever dream of. Please be sure to like, comment, share, and most importantly, subscribe so you don't miss my next video essay. My name is Bunky, and you've been watching Bunky TV.